Marketing here to put on another fantabulous webinar with my two associates, Molly and Jamie. Welcome,
Hi,
gang.
everyone.
Hi.
And so today is our October 2015 webinar, and it's pretty cool. Molly has been putting this together for a while now. So Molly, thanks a lot for putting it all together.
Sure.
All about how to embrace PR and court the media. And this is something that all of you are interested in. I know, having conversations with you over the years about how to get, more PR or any PR and better media coverage. So thanks, guys, for participating and telling our people about this stuff, because it's kind of weird territory when it comes to, it's kind of a weird category of marketing, the way that you have to do it. It's not just like, oh, I write some content, throw it up there. It's got a lot of different pieces and parts to it. And so that's why we'll be covering a lot of different things, how to implement, how to make one. What are the reasons why you would create a PR campaign? What are some of the reasons not to make a PR campaign, right? Prepare for a PR crisis, how to be quick. You need a system to put this together, and so any system's better than no system for dealing with the PR crisis. How to pursue the media, who to talk to for different stories, and using breaking news for your business. How to write an effective press release and be consistent with your content, right? Jamie's shaking his head in affirmative.
Always.
Saying that is correct. That's how you do it. So Molly, why don't you tell the gang, and by the way, everybody, if you have questions while we're going along, if you need some clarification, go ahead and put your question in the question box on the GoToWebinar tool bar there, and we'll get it over here, and Molly will ask the question, and we'll get through this in just under an hour. So why don't we go ahead and talk about how you get to creating and implementing a PR strategy, Molly?
Sure. Well, public relations, just to kind of define it simply, is really just the way you manage your brand's image, flat out. And these are the things that need to be established really before you can even implement that strategy. So this is more of what you need to establish, and then throughout the rest of the presentation we're going to talk about how to use these things within your strategy. But this is really the key elements that you need to start with. These are the key elements. So straight up, first thing you need to do is establish your brand identity. That is who you are, how you want to be seen, and how you're going to share that image that you want for your brand with your employees. So if you can think about Apple and Red Bull, those are two very different companies with two very different brand identities, but they're very distinct. Apple is all about kind of sleek, minimalist, sexy technology, and Red Bull is all about high-intensity, adrenaline, adventure. And a lawyer or a doctor are probably not going to go with either of those when establishing their brand identity, but it's a good example of ways to identify who you want to be to your audience. Are you, you guys deal with kind of sensitive topics. Are you going to be straightforward? Are you going to be really sincere, serious, empathetic, and compassionate? Or do you want to be a little bit more laid back and kind of have fun with your brand and your company? It's, when dealing with these subjects, it can be kind of a breath of fresh air to have somebody who's witty and funny and not making light of the situation, but enjoying themselves, enjoying what they do.
Right, because people can connect better with people they like. Bob Battle does a great job with this. Bob Battle, who's a DUI traffic attorney up here in Northern Virginia, who's also a comedian, and he's got his own kind of brand, and he's got his bobblehead, and he's got, it's kind of, everything's a little tongue-in-cheek. He's a great lawyer, but there's just an example of somebody that's got kind of a connection with the brand. Hubie and Abraham, who have a connection to Harley Davidson, no official affiliation, but just because they participate in so many community events, and they've got Harley riders on their staff as investigators, and they've got kind of have that brand identity that connects them with the motorcycle community, who in fact drive cars and make tons of referrals. Jim Dotson, Jamie, the bike guy, right?
Cycling, yeah.
Yeah, and so these are just different ways. And one thing that's important when we're talking about brand identity is that what everybody really needs to know is that it's about your who you are. Your brand is your name. And so when somebody makes a recommendation to you, it's either by your firm name or by your name. So that needs to be consistent. Otherwise, people will get confused. It's called brand confusion. If you have multiple different kinds of personalities, just like if you're talking to someone with multiple personalities, like Jamie's got multiple personalities. You never know who you're going to run into any given day.
Oh, that's not true.
But I'm just kidding. But if you ran into somebody different every day, you're confused by who am I talking to right now. So you want to have the least amount of confusion for your brand.
Right, and that's where you're going to establish that communication plan. Who are you going to be as a company, and how you're going to basically disseminate that information to everybody else in the company.
And you can change.
Yeah.
I mean, but you need to stay consistent for a little bit, but you can't just be flipping all around, right?
That's right. And we talked about it a little bit in our social media webinar, was that maybe 2 months ago, but brand identity ties in a lot with a lot of the lessons that we were going over for social media. The best way to resonate with people is to just be human, be yourself.
Right, be yourself, exactly. That's who they're going to come in and meet anyway.
That's what's going to come off as most natural in everything that you do to begin with. And
a lot of times the way to do that is find something that you enjoy doing. Something that a lot of doctors, we have a lot of doctors that are runners, right? Mary Beth Crane is a runner, and she runs like thousands of miles a day, practically. And so she participates in all these runs, and that's kind of their brand, one of the many. Anyway, so there's all kinds of things, but think about stuff that you like to do and how you can identify. And it might just be your name. I mean, we're talking about different kinds of activities, but it could just be your name. Like there's that attorney down in Houston that some of you may cringe. I think, what is it, Mike the Hammer?
The Hammer.
The Hammer. I mean, that is a brand identity, Better Call Saul, that's the television identity, but you get what I mean. What do we mean by targeted media lists? Are we talking about different people to go after, or?
So with a target media list, they're different media outlets. Basically, when you're looking for coverage in the news, you want to find those media outlets that would be
susceptible or interested in what you're talking about in your stuff.
Absolutely, yes.
Not everybody is.
Right, and sometimes that's just going to be a medical journal or the ABA journal or Podiatry Today. It's not always going to be kind of right in front of your potential clients. That's something that you need to consider, is getting your name out there, because once you've established yourself as credible in the news, you're more likely to get picked up by more news sources. So
right.
Start where you can.
They see that you've been in other news and on TV and and have done video. That gives you more credibility to doing more. They don't feel like, oh, well, I have to train this person how to be on TV.
Right, absolutely. And when we're talking about influencers in your field, we really mean those people who have kind of big names for themselves. If you think of like Dr. Drew and Dr. Oz, those are two obviously very Hollywood examples of celebrity people that are in the news pretty frequently. But if you can make a connection with people who are even in your local news station or have had their stuff published in a local newspaper, just kind of collaborating with them, building off their relationship with the news stations that they've already worked with, and having that connection may lead others to think of you as a trustworthy news source as well.
And there's high to low with this. Like Molly said, you can use like local actors, spokesmodels, somebody that looks like somebody, or something even as big as what Hupy and Abraham do with dear old dad, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, right? I mean, Denny Crane, even though he doesn't say I'm Denny Crane, looks like Denny Crane, sounds like Denny Crane, and he does the commercial. And you guys can go to hupy.com and check that one out. That is, and they also have Judge Joe Brown, and that's their brand. And that's another thing about having consistency, is that you can see that if someone sees that commercial on TV, then when they go to the website, they're like, oh, I'm in the right place. That's the commercial I saw. So you want to make sure that you're connecting all this stuff together.
Absolutely. And when we're talking about the major events and activities that you guys are involved in, this is stuff that you really want to kind of plan out ahead of time. If you can, you should map it out for the entire year and then give yourself pretty much a minimum of 3 months to prepare. And this is when you want to start creating those press releases. You're going to have to find out the who, what, when, where, all that information, gather it all together, and then you're going to use the information that you've collected to basically inform the news, hey, we've got this thing going on, it's really interesting, here's why people would care about it, and we want you to include it in your news story. So we'll get a little bit more into press releases as we continue, but that's the kind of stuff that you need to really have mapped out before you even begin working on your PR strategy.
And it's important to be interesting to the people. And what are your people interested in, right? You know, how can you participate in the community and do cool things instead of just being all about yourself and all about whatever service you provide, which is ultimately what you want to get to. But you can't just go out there and say, hey, the law firm of Umpty Frats is putting on an event, come see us because we're a great law firm. You know, be provocative in a positive way, be helpful, get people interested, and it's not a one-shot deal, right? I mean, it's just not one press release, one announcement, and then you're out. And as Molly said, I mean, a minimum 3 months. You need to start thinking about this stuff 6 months in advance. But, you know, I would also be conservative and start small with some smaller events until you get your get a little experience with it. Okay, so what do we mean by this prepare for a PR crisis?
So I kind of started with the worst of the worst, because if you have a PR crisis and you get yourself into the news, that's not going to help you. You need to be prepared for the crisis first. So as you can see here, this is clearly a huge PR crisis. This is Britney Spears around 2007 when she was having a little bit of a breakdown.
Poor
and
girl, can never get over it.
No, she'll never move past that. It's a nightmare for her publicist.
I forgot about that entirely until this particular presentation.
I'm just here to remind you. So this is obviously catastrophic in her world. This is very publicized. This is tons of people are seeing it, and she has yet to really entirely live this one down. Where you might see a PR crisis is going to be obviously on a much smaller scale, but you know, a bad review is still a bit of a crisis because, like I mentioned before, this is the way that you're managing your brand. And if you're not managing these reviews and you're getting these bad reviews, then you're not going to be able to control what people are saying about your brand, and you're not going to be able to be a part of the conversation.
Well, and the first thing that you got to do is be a good lawyer or be a good doctor. Do what you say that you're, which put out there on your shingle, do what you say you're going to do.
Results speak for themselves most of the time.
Right, and this you can't hide anymore in this world. And so people are going to go out on social media if they have a hint of you being disrespectful or treating them the way that they don't want to be treated. And it's way easier just to be nice and get through something that's awkward and uncomfortable than go nuts on somebody and have this out there for months and months and months. Because what does this do? The reason why we put this out here so quickly is to really get you to think about it, because we see it so often, bad reviews on lawyers. We look at them ourselves before we take on a client because we're like, we're not going to deal with this guy, right? And, I mean, what happens is when somebody refers a lawyer or a doctor by name, what do, Jamie? What are they going to do?
They're going to search for that name, and review sites rank very highly, especially some of the more prevalent ones. Yelp is very popular. It's going to always be showing up near the top of the search results for any sort of business search, in addition to any industry-specific directories as well.
Okay, and so this still happens though, right? Even to the best of you. You're going to get, especially those of you that are running a volume type of practice or a volume type of business, you're going to have some people that you just can't placate and make happy. So what do you do? What do you do, Molly?
So yeah, I mean, it just happens. You will get negative feedback and possibly even bad press. What you really need to prepare yourself for is the one person who's going to take care of this. You need somebody who's going to respond to the review or the bad press, apologize for what's going on, and then you want to try and flood that channel with more positive reviews. That's really the most, I think, impactful way to deal with a bad review is to respond and respond maturely and politely. It's so easy for people to get caught up in the heat of the moment and say, well, that's not even true. I didn't even do that. You know, that's not what happened. They're totally making this up, and it's not even accurate information. But nobody sees that. Nobody sees your side of the story. They just see you being childish. They see you not taking criticism well. So when we're talking about something like a technology crisis, obviously you need to have everything backed up. You've got to have, you can't just have one place where you're holding everything. And if you do have an issue, like what if you lose power for the day? Sometimes things just happen. You need to make sure that you're communicating with your customers. It's so much better to say, we're so sorry, we're not going to be able to meet today, we're having a technical issue, but we'll resolve it and we'll reschedule with you as soon as possible. I mean, how many times have you joined our webinar and realized 3 minutes in that we're having technical issues?
Never.
If
We're
we didn't
perfect.
tell you that we were having technical issues, but we're working on it and we're gonna fix it, you'd probably leave. You'd probably say, well, I don't know what that's about, but I'm not wasting my time
And
with
stuff
that
happens,
anymore.
and that's the point.
Yeah.
And
you
it's
know,
all about how you handle it. And that's why you have this in here. It's all about how you handle it, because you don't want people calling up and like you being irritated with them. So what are you going to do when something happens?
right. And there's different levels of a quote-unquote PR crisis. It just really comes down to how you're managing your brand's image. A natural disaster doesn't have to be catastrophic to be considered a disaster. You might have been snowed out of the office and now you can't meet with that one person that you had planned to meet with. You just need to have that process in place to make sure somebody's been notified and that you've got a reschedule process in place to make that happen. So this review that we just pulled up here, this is a great example of a well-handled response to a negative review. This isn't even a terrible review, but the guy is complaining. This is from TripAdvisor. It seems like he rented a hotel before or a home before, and this time it wasn't up to par. And management said, thank you for the feedback. We apologize that it wasn't up to your standards, and we've taken note of your concerns. We're taking you seriously. That is the way to respond to any negative feedback, no matter if it's true, if it's a lie, no matter what is going on. Respond in this way. Because if you respond, you want to hit the button there. If you respond defensively, you are going to sound like Amy's Baking Company, who just went crazy. It is childish, it is stupid, it's ignorant, and it's really embarrassing. So just take it in stride. It's okay.
They'll never live that down.
No, they've actually closed now.
Out of business.
Yeah.
That's some person that blew it.
Make great entertainment though for about 24
for webinars.
hours.
And I have
Forever.
I've seen
This and Britney Spears.
so many review sites where somebody leaves a negative review and the attorney or the doctor addresses the rest of Yelp, doesn't address the person who left the review, but addresses anybody who could possibly be reading this review. If you're reading this review, I just want to tell you that that's not how this went down, and that's just embarrassing. You're embarrassing yourself. Don't do it.
Well, and step one is do your best just not to upset people, which
Absolutely.
isn't always easy, but you want to go out there and try to make it right.
Unfortunately, it's much easier to get a negative review than it is a positive review. People are going to be much more inclined to leave a negative review, and negative reviews tend to stand out amongst a sea of otherwise positive reviews. People expect businesses to have
some negative
a majority
reviews.
Of positive reviews
Sure.
too. They don't even notice them hardly. Like, oh, well, you don't have any good reviews. You're not even trying. But those one or two bad ones are going to stand out. Is it unfair? Perhaps, but it's a fact of doing business.
Okay, so we already talked about this. Really, the appoint one person and take the lead. You should have like your spokesperson. Right, Molly?
Yeah, and this person really needs to be completely immersed in the brand identity that you've defined, because they're the person who's going to disseminate information to all the other employees and keep them on the same page. So if you've got, someone working at the front desk who doesn't know what's going on, and you've got kind of a behind-the-scenes crisis, and somebody walks in the office addressing the issue, you need to have them...
Or asking about why aren't you answering the phone? This person might not even know the phones are down.
Absolutely.
Or the webs, God forbid the websites are down or whatever. That's exactly right. When these kinds of things happen, or your whole database crashes and you can't do intake or whatever. I mean, these things are realistic things that happen, and you just need to be able to respond.
Right, and obviously you need to find out what caused the issue, if it's possible, take the steps to prevent it from happening again. Respond appropriately, like with those reviews, and then learn from the experience, which is probably one of the most basic concepts of any experience, is to learn from it.
Okay. So let's talk about good media. Like, we want to get good stuff out there, right? So how are we going to, if we've got a good story, that's a good case, or we cured something crazy, or we figured out a new procedure for heel pain, or whatever, something cool, we want the media to know about it, right, Jamie?
Right, and unless you do something truly groundbreaking, they're not going to be coming to you. It's going to be up to you to spread the news and make media outlets, and I mean traditional media outlets, newspapers, local news, television affiliates, whatever the case may be, but also online media outlets. It's going to be up to you to take the story to them, and you not only have to take the story to them, but you're going to be one of dozens, if not hundreds, of emails in their inbox or voicemails on their phone pitching stories to them, so you need to find a way to stand out. The best way to handle any sort of pursuit of media attention would ideally be to utilize any existing connections you have. Now you're saying, well, who am I, the White House press secretary or whatever? I don't have just dozens of reporters saved in my phone. How do I go about this? It doesn't always have to be that extensive, and the way we typically recommend doing it is by networking. Get out, get involved in your community. Don't think about making connections, think about making friends. Be friendly with these people. You all have a shared mutual interest in your community, in whatever events you happen to both be involved in. It doesn't have to be a business relationship as much as it can just be a mutually beneficial friendship. And then when you have news that's worthwhile to them, you're helping them out by filling copy space that they need to fill so their editor gets off their back, and they're willing to return the favor down the line when you've got stories that need some additional attention.
Yeah, and certainly you can start in your community, but you also want to develop your list of these resources that you're going to reach out to. And some of these people could just have their own networks that everybody listens to, and they send on information. They may be part of some blog network. They don't have to be the official news like ABC or whatever.
Right.
But whoever that you end up reaching out to, and it should be really kind of specific to what you're talking about. If you're working in a specific area of law, there's a lot of directories and a lot of bulletin boards and secure areas out on the internet where people engage and talk about particular subjects, so tapping into that. But you should create an ongoing list of these contacts that you reach out to and start building that relationship, as you said, Jamie.
Yeah.
Because anytime that you have a story and you're comfortable with them and they're comfortable with you, this will just get easier and easier and easier for you to get some notoriety and some press.
Right, and I talk about this a little bit on the next slide, I believe, but building that trust and authority, becoming a reliable source, is
Right.
the way you flip that dynamic, and instead of you being the one reaching out and going to these people begging for press, literally, they're coming to you because they know that they can rely on you to provide them accurate and authoritative information on whatever the subject may be.
And so what are these little examples that you've got down here, Jamie? This is what's not how you don't do it, right?
Yeah, my last point here, don't be needy or annoying, especially if you're sending unsolicited requests for coverage of a particular story. You can very easily overdo it. Like I said, anybody in any sort of major press situation, whether they're blogging for a high-volume site or if they're in the traditional press corps, are going to be inundated every day with dozens of these types of requests. And the way you stand out is by standing out, not by calling them repeatedly, not by emailing them repeatedly. Dear PR is a pretty funny Twitter account that you can follow if you want some great examples of some sarcastic journalist thoughts on interacting with the PR industry. There's also Dear Journalists for the opposite perspective as well. They like to jab at each other, and it can be pretty entertaining sometimes. But here are two particularly good examples of what you don't want to be doing and a great way to sort of blacklist yourself from any chance of being successful with this type of outreach.
I mean, some of the most successful campaigns, and I'm not going to name any names because I'll get in trouble with them. I think they already told me not to tell anyone about some of their success, but it's really what we've always said about writing good content out there to kind of, it's not just bait for possible clients, but also the media. If you put out good information for the media, it just makes their job easier, and like, wow, this attorney or this doctor or this whoever know what they're talking about. And so I want to quote them in my story, and they'll reach out to you. And so, you know, I know a lot of attorneys that do a very good job on getting to the media by really just putting good content on their website. That's how they start. And maybe you want to have some kind of back and forth with a particular media personality on it. There's all kinds of ways to kind of get involved in the media. Step one, write good content, be interested, get out there, network, but do not harass them, which is your point, Jamie. Don't harass them and be annoying.
Just generally participate in the conversation about whatever topic you want to be
right. If you're not getting PR, it's not because it doesn't work. It's because you're being boring or annoying. Right, guys? Because PR is like one of the oldest marketing vehicles on the planet. All right, what do we got here? This is what we're talking about, being interesting.
More info about the proper way to go about pursuing media, especially in an unsolicited fashion. The longer you work this sort of system and the more connections you can establish, the more sort of interpersonal this becomes. But especially if you're going into this brand new, you have, you know, zero media connections, you need to be top-notch with the pitch that you're providing them for the story. There's no shortage of solicitations for press coverage. Press releases often go ignored. You know, how many hundreds of press releases are put out in any given day, and how many of them are of little to no interest of anybody. So you need to have an angle, and preferably multiple angles, that you can be pitching to multiple people or the same person. If they come back and they're like, well, you know, it's the topic sounds okay, but, you know, this angle's not really what my editor's going to be looking for or whatever, have additional selling points for whatever your topic may be. If you're an attorney, signing a big case isn't necessarily newsworthy. Sometimes it is, depending on the scale of the case itself, but a lot of times just because it's big to you doesn't mean it's necessarily newsworthy. What is the selling point of your pitch? And have that in mind, especially if you do have some established media connections. You need to know who the best option to pitch any particular story is, and that answer is going to be different every time. You need to be familiar with these people that you're trying to work with. You need to know their bodies of work. You need to know what topics they typically write about, what topics they typically cover. If you have options X and Y, one of them is probably going to be better suited for whatever particular topic you have in mind for any particular
That's a great point, Jamie. I mean, they got egos too, and so you want to, you know, come to them and say, well, I've read all your stuff. I think you're great. I mean, we have similar writing styles or whatever, some way to connect with a particular writer. That, you know, it makes their job easier to have a reliable source to reach out to when these kinds of things happen, and you know, over and over again.
Exactly. If you've become friends with these people and they know that they can trust you as a reliable and authoritative source on whatever your area of expertise is, then, like I said, you can reach that point where the dynamic reverses and they're reaching out to you for comment on a story or a 30-second sound clip for, you know, expert opinion from, you know, Dr. So-and-so about whatever topic at hand is. There's a lot of benefit to be had by just, I don't want to say massaging, but by curating these media relationships over time.
Yeah, and the media is just as hungry as you are for new information than as you are for getting it out there. And they don't want to have to hunt all over the place to look for it. So if you become somebody that can go to over and over again, especially with stuff that they're not thinking about, they're not sitting around trolling looking for, I mean, they are, but they can't in any way possibly get all of them. And lawyers tend to have some crazy stories, you know, with nationally recognized names. And if there's any way that you can get out there and talk about the case, talk about the circumstances of the case, that would be of interest to people. Good Lord, that's why there's so many lawyer books and stories and TV shows and movies, and that's why we have an ID channel, because people are crazy.
I worked in newspaper for 2 years, and
So you keep telling us, Jamie.
they love, there's no shortage of desire for more stories, but it's a very hectic environment where there's not always a ton of time to be doing that sort of outreach and looking for stories on the journalist's part. They're either interviewing people, or they're writing, or they're editing, or they're getting yelled at by their editors a lot of the time. But so because of that, they very much appreciate having stories brought to them, but they're not going to care if it's not a story worth telling, and
Right.
that's your job.
But if it is a story worth telling, the other thing is that if it's worthwhile, like for instance, one of our dear clients, Brian Beckham of VB Attorneys down in Houston, everybody remembers the Captain Phillips movie of years ago starring Tom Hanks. Are you going to get to this?
Yeah, next slide. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll get to the next. Oh, look at this. Okay, so well, this isn't Brian.
No. Sorry.
Okay, so
Next
just
slide.
real quick.
But
so
these are ways that you can demonstrate the value of cultivating these media relationships within your brand identity, as Molly was talking about earlier. You see Chris Davis here on the right, an attorney, being featured on the news. These sort of video clips are great ways to augment your existing video content on the site. It goes to a tremendous length to build your authority and credibility for the layperson visiting your site. It also speaks volumes to other media channels in the future when looking for, hey, we need an attorney to comment on this story. Molly touched on it already a little bit, but hey, here's a guy with proven capability.
He's done it 50 times.
Absolutely.
We don't have to coach him.
And that's exactly what Dr. Khosrowbadi, I apologize if I butchered that name, that's what Dr. Khosrowbadi did. He actually took acting lessons because he was featured on the news one time, and he was kind of, I guess, a little bit of a nervous mess. So
I thought that was Joey.
No, he took acting lessons to basically calm his nerves, and he has landed himself on the show The Doctors, which is pretty primetime TV. He's landed himself on that show a handful of times, and because of that, he's also been featured on all of these other news sources you can see.
I'm sure it has nothing to do with his unfortunate looks either.
He's a handsome man.
Right. And speaking of handsome men, look at our buddy Chris Davis down here, who's had he's been on TV more times than many, and that's the reason why, is because he can speak, he's smooth, he's confident, he's done it so many times. They come to him, he knows what to do, he knows where the microphone goes, he knows how to speak, he knows how to, all of it. And an interesting story, years and years ago, everybody remembers the Natasha Richardson ski accident, where she fell and busted her head and sadly died later on because of brain trauma. And when that happened, the news went nuts because it was celebrity, of course. And CNN, Anderson Cooper was doing a story about it that night. And of course, the producers that are hungry for information and to get some legal experts talking about it, where do they go? Where do they go? Where does everybody go? Everybody goes to Google. So producers get out there on Google and they start looking for a ski accident, brain injury attorney, and they find Chris Davis's Facebook profile. This is how it all comes together. Facebook profile was a picture of him skiing, right? And he happens to also be a brain injury attorney. And so he was on CNN, Anderson Cooper that night. And that was, and also because the producers had seen that he had done local media and local TV, interviews. So it all just kind of ties together. And just because you haven't done it yet, that doesn't mean that you're not going to do it, because we're telling you how to do it. If you get out there and be interesting, the first couple, if you've never done it before, then they're generally, the media is pretty cool with you, but it's much easier as you do it more and more. You're more comfortable, they're more comfortable working with you.
And not that you need it, but this is just another reason to have video on your website. Prove that you're comfortable in front of the camera, prove that you can talk. If you're awkward and clammed up, then it's probably not going to work in your favor. So just get comfortable in front of the camera and learn to talk to the camera and talk about the things that are important to you and your business.
And remember, too, that the media is very competitive. And if you've got a story to tell, one of them wants the breaking news. And I think this is what you're going to talk about here on the next slide is the breaking news. And so your story has, you want to kind of sell it to the highest bidder, not necessarily that they're going to pay you for it, but, you know, who's going to give you the best spot, who's going to give you the longest time, you know, more links, whatever else you can get from them, right, Jamie?
So this is the ultimate enviable position, right? Where you're the commodity and your story is in demand. They're blowing up your phone and not the other way around, begging you to be on their program. Does it happen all the time? No, but should you be prepared for it? Yes, because the downside of not being prepared can have some pretty dire consequences. Tell them about the phone call you got.
Oh, well, this is what I was talking about Brian Beckham now. Brian Beckham called me up one day, and Brian, I'm going to tell the story. You're probably not even listening, but so I was down in Nashville at a doctor conference, and I got a call, and he's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, good. And he goes, I got Good Morning America coming to my house in 2 hours. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. For what? And he was like, well, maybe I never told you about this case, but you know, the movie Captain of Phillips, it was out in like a week or two. I was like, yeah, the one with Tom Hanks. And he was like, yeah, we represent the crew. And that's huge. And obviously that's connected to a celebrity, a connection through the movie. But the truth of it is that movie was just Fantasyland and all, you know, made up. And it made the crew look bad. And then Captain Phillips went on to write a book and make money, and, you know, all this stuff happened without the crew. And so Beckham, Brian Beckham, and Vuk were suing on behalf of the crew. They ended up getting a ton of press, and anybody can go to vbattorneys.com and check out his website and get in there and see all the Captain Phillips stuff. And the press the press kits that we put out there, that's another thing, make it easier for the press to find stuff. And there's a bunch of different interviews, and they've had that and as a result of having such a high-profile case, you know, to your point, though, we didn't know until the last minute. We could have probably done a lot better job, but we still got it and got things moving, but that's because of the level of the case, because it was in such demand.
And that's, to a certain extent, just the nature of these types of breaking stories.
But you got to be ready.
You're by definition
we were
under a time crunch. So yeah, the first thing to know about any sort of major life-changing breaking news story like this is to buckle up for a lot of work in a very short time frame.
Right.
If you want to be doing it correctly, it's going to require a sort of all-hands-on-deck nights and weekends approach until the thing is done. But hopefully you can have at least thought about what sorts of things need to be put in motion beforehand. And this is sort of what we have here. If, you know, for the ultimate sort of golden egg situation, you want to have at least, like I said, at least thought about how you want to handle it. You need to have plans in place for creating and distributing a press release, interacting with the media in whatever fashion is required. If it's really big enough news that's going to involve TV, but at the very least some sort of interview, personal interaction with the press. You need to be coordinating social media content as well as content on your website, preferably video in addition to text. All of these things need to come together very quickly while staying within the brand identity that we identified at the top of the presentation. You know, this is the best opportunity you're ever going to have to present a coherent picture of your brand from every possible angle. The benefits are tremendous in terms of volume to your website and potential exposure to you individually or your firm or your practice. And it's the best opportunity you have to stay on message and present consistent branding across board.
Yeah, and then it's what do you do after the fact? So, because it has a lifeline, you know, and it's usually pretty fast. Stuff doesn't stay in the news very long, and it depends upon the sensationalism of how long it's going to be there. And so, like, fortunately, you know, Beckham's got himself a good team here and in his office that kept that thing going for a while and ended up, you know, there's been a bunch of piracy activities involving these big maritime ships. And as a result, something happened not long after the Captain Phillips to another guy that went to and found he was kidnapped. And while he was kidnapped, his wife actually found the VB attorney's site based on that same type of stuff and said, hey, these guys went up against Captain Phillips in Big Hollywood. And so that ended up getting that case too. And ultimately, they've done a lot of good things for the maritime industry in making those ships more safe, which is what they want to do. And you know, it just depends upon what your particular motivations are as an attorney or as a business person, as a doctor. It just so happens that, you know, like VB, of course they want to get big cases, but they also want to make a difference. And so there's media that can be brought about by actually making a difference. And so, you know, as we go on, you can utilize that information again over and over again about, remember when this event happened, we did these things, or this is the outcome. You know, now the seas are a lot safer.
And this also kind of lends to the fact that you really need to have robust practice areas on your website, because that's how you can pull together that press kit and kind of pull those pieces together,
right,
is by having outlined everything that you do and multiple different examples of how you do it and the different ways you service people who need help with whatever the practice area is. And those are the different key pieces
and the social proof
of your press kit, right?
And that you've done these cases before.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will see, wow, okay, well, this guy's done the same thing that I need. He's already, you know, fought the big hospital or gone up against the same insurance company that I'm going, or the same mass tort drug or whatever. Make sure that you have that information out there. Another real quick thing about breaking news is that you can make this big and vast, like what we just talked about with that Captain Phillips campaign, which was pretty enormous. But you can also do little things, like we've got this example of doing a video out there. When something big happens, you can create a video and put it out there on YouTube, because where do people go? They don't. Generally, people don't call the phone number they see on TV. If they see something, some outbreak, where are they going to go? Where do they go, Molly?
The internet.
They go to the web, and they type in whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're out there quick with content, if you're out there quick with video, that's a lot faster than you can get something up on, and a lot less expensive than you can get something out on TV. TVs, especially nowadays, with election stuff coming up, it's going to be very, very expensive to do television advertising.
It also shows the media that you're staying on top of the current
Right.
events and breaking news, so you're knowledgeable about what's happening in the news.
Right. But yes, this is a great point. Be ready. This is not settling cases. This is going after the big kahunas and you know, getting some press. And you got to be ready for positive and negative feedback. You got to be ready for all of it. You got to stand your ground.
So a press release is, of course, a great way to kind of pitch your story to the news, and you've got to consider a number of things when you're writing your press release. And we touched on pretty much most of these, but they have a little bit of a different way of doing things with the press release. There's a very set template, basically, of how a press release needs to be written, and I'm happy to include a link to a template in the follow-up email. But you want your press release, obviously, to be newsworthy, clear, relevant, get to the point, and make it concise. But it's really kind of critical to find that interesting angle, like Jamie mentioned, and that can be a little bit counterintuitive when you say get to the point and make it concise, because you've got this interesting angle going, but you don't want to waste anybody's time trying to kind of pitch your story right off the bat. You need to make that headline literally exactly what your press release is going to say. So huge event sponsored by attorney, period. Don't be clever. You know, let the reporter try and make that awesome headline, and you focus on why they should care about the fact that you're sponsoring this huge event. You know, obviously you need to make it relevant to your audience, but also consider the fact that probably what you're talking about, nobody cares. That's the best way to start with any sort of press release, is assume that nobody cares, because that's going to force you to find that unique way to connect it to the people who you want to reach. And there are a certain number of things that are just kind of good practice to include. Photos, quotes, and pricing and deadlines should be hands down obvious. That's not something that you should consider including. That's something you absolutely need to include. The who, what, when, where, and the why. But the photos and quotes really kind of just beef up whatever content you're already sending over. And these are two great examples right here. You can see, you know, it's not a huge deal that this Jacksonville attorney happened to file a lawsuit, but it happened to be a really interesting subject that he's talking about, something that's not your run-of-the-mill, everyday kind of situation. This is the sinking of the El Faro, obviously. And then the story above this is just a really feel-good story within a community that's, this health center was sponsoring a workshop, and they got that into the news just by pitching it in an interesting way. It's also where my parents have a beach house, so I happen to like that one.
So what do we mean by this? Be consistent. This is knowing what you have on your site, not getting caught with your pants down and said you said this and that.
So, well, it's a lot of things. You know, a short answer is it's brand identity, which we've talked about at length already. But the importance of being aware of what you have on your website, what you've said in the past, what you maybe need to take off of your website because it's no longer accurate or relevant, is only compounded when you begin having more and more eyeballs on your site, particularly if you're generating more media attention than you happen to have been previously. I have here, don't get content amnesia. Be aware of what you have on your site and why. If you've got a lot of information out there pertaining to case types you don't really handle anymore or don't want to be handling anymore, or something that was timely but is no longer timely and now just irrelevant, you're getting off message, and not through any will of your own, but just because you're letting the distribution channel that you have control over, your website, get out of your control. The website is probably your best tool for projecting your brand message, and you want to hold on to the reins pretty tightly.
That's a great point. Matt White of Graham White Law in Louisville often sends us little notes, hey, we're not focusing on this type of case anymore, we're now going to focus on this type of case, and then we know just to go back and clean up the content. And he's aware of all the case types that are on his website, and he knows if this one's not working for me, I need to take that step back and audit what I've been doing. So it's really helpful, and now he's not getting bugged about those cases that he's not trying to take anymore.
It can be particularly important too with things like mass tort cases. If you deal with defective prescription drugs or defective medical devices, anything along those lines, any sort of class action or mass tort, there's often pretty limited windows for filing. If you spend a year or 2 years building up tons of content on your website for a particular case or class that is now closed, all of a sudden that's now, you know, what percentage of your website is pertaining to content that's not going to net you any new clients or any new money and is off message.
Yeah, and I think this is our last, we're done here, so if there's no questions, I would just like to add some other points, is that, you know, media and PR is really kind of one of the I would say the icing on the cake, the sprinkles, once you've got everything else down, unless you've got something amazing to talk about. If you don't know what you're doing, then get some help. There's, if you've got somebody that you know that has media connections, then go talk to them, because it's so much about who you know in the town. And, you know, the reporters in that particular town or county, they have their friends that they go to for information. See what you can do about getting to know these reporters. See what you can do about working with good media buyers. Ask around if you're interested in jumping to getting some TV advertising done. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very effective when you do it right. We shoot commercials out of here down the hall all the time, some big commercials that work very well, but they're expensive, not necessarily the production of the commercial, but the media buying itself. And like I said earlier in our program, it goes up during election years, and the time gets expensive. Just know what you're getting into. But I know a lot of lawyers that once they made that step and they, coughed up the 10, 20 grand a month that they need to, made a world of difference. So they went from, 5 to 10 cases sign up to 80 to 100 sign up because of that. But it's a different kind of business. You're going to say something, Molly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, don't be intimidated by approaching the news too. I mean, this is stuff that it
Right.
seems kind of overwhelming, and if you think about, well, I'm a podiatrist, I'm not really the kind of guy who likes to stand up and do public speaking or be on the news. You can start small, again, with those medical journals or Podiatry Today. Start with those kind of local things and just build up that reputation, and then take it from there. And it's really not, it's tough. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's really not impossible. Don't think that because you're a small town attorney or a small town podiatrist, you don't have a chance of getting in the news. We've had people who, Andrew Schneider, for example, always takes advantage of breaking news stories that are relevant to his podiatry practice. And when Dave Grohl broke his ankle or his foot, he took advantage of that. When Katy Perry, I don't know if she sprained or broke, whatever the case was, she injured herself, and that kind of, when people are looking for information about that sort of thing, and when media outlets are looking for podiatrists who are on top of things and are articulate and can speak on camera and are knowledgeable in these fields, they're going to notice people like that. And we do have a question from Christy Dodge. What is the best way to reach out to media contacts? I've heard direct messages through Twitter are effective, but you can only send them to people who are following you.
Well, I think that it depends upon how that particular person in the media kind of communicates. Some are big Twitter people, some people on Facebook, some people like old-fashioned email, some people like the old-fashioned come get to know me. It really just depends. There's just a variety of different ways that you can reach out and get in touch with these people. It's, through mutual introductions. If you can participate in fundraising events that these people are at that are of interest to them, and kind of, get up there and rub shoulders and just kind of start conversation. But don't overdo it, like just having coffee right now. We're just getting to know each other. So don't jump, to the end game right away and ask them if they'll do a story on your new case. Just kind of talk about it and see what their interests are. That might not be the right reporter or the right person. It might be another person that they would recommend that you talk to.
And those local charities, those events that you're involved in, those are really critical, because those do generally get coverage because it's a feel-good story. People in the local area are interested, and the news definitely likes to take advantage of the opportunity to report on stuff like that.
Those events are great ways to start building a list of media contacts too. Tom mentioned it, I think, very briefly toward the beginning, but it's important to not just to go back to the original question. I do think Twitter, for journalists in particular, is usually a pretty good avenue of outreach for them, but it's not just a direct message, hey, here's this article I wrote, you should cover it. It involves, participating in the greater conversation. It's, hey, I saw the story you wrote about topic X.
Right.
I think there's a little more to it. You can find some additional information here, whatever the case may be. But anytime you learn about new potential contacts, network with new people, keep a list of anybody who might be
That's
useful.
important, just like your lead list. You want to have a media list.
Exact
people
same
to
thing.
reach out to you for different stuff.
Their name, what or who they write for, whether it be a website or a newspaper or whatever, if they cover a particular beat or whatever, that's old journalism jargon, but if they cover particular, if they focus specifically on legal interests or medical interests or whatever the case may be. So when the time comes and you have a topic, you know already who it may be most relevant to. If you're able to cultivate contact information, all the better. Keep any additional notes you have in there. Oh, they love talking on Twitter, or they never respond to Twitter, whatever the case may be.
And we're pretty lucky because one of the best media people that I know, Michelle Davis with Chris Davis, is sending me texts while we're having this webinar with some great points for everybody. And here's just one that's really important, is that media wants to interview the victims. And no media can talk to the victims without the lawyer present. And so that's another way that you can go out there and get media attention. And human interest stories are very what reporters eat up. Public safety issues, what's going on. It's not about the money of the case. That's not how you want to lead this. This is the biggest case ever. It's about how people are hurt, how, it's about the person, the people, especially when it comes to personal injury attorneys. But, if you're an estate planning attorney and there's a big change in the law, or, somebody's will wasn't done correct, or their estate was split up and somebody was ripped off, that stuff happens all the time in celebrity land that you can talk about. If you're a criminal lawyer, who did your client know, or how can you create some kind of twist to get the media interested in it? There's all kinds of ways that if you just do some creative thinking, it's no different than being provocative for your particular client that you're trying to attract to be provocative in a good way to the media to get them to talk about your story. Okay, so any other questions?
Nope.
Well, thank you guys, and thanks, Michelle, for piping in and giving us some good tips to tell our listeners today. Of course, if anybody is interested in seeing what that media machine does up there in Seattle, she does a fantastic job.
Yeah.
Michelle Davis with Chris Davis, who came to us years ago with a Yellow Page ad that's pretty funny. I'm sure that she pulls it out sometimes to show people about where he came from and where he is now. And we're very proud of our relationship with the Davises, and what a great job and what a great attorney Chris is. He's just a really fantastic attorney and great people. And they do a lot of great media stuff, both, get on TV, get on the radio. They buy TV, they buy radio, and they've done very well. So anybody can do it. And so it's just taking these kinds of tips and getting started. If anybody's looking for help, please give us a call. We can certainly help you with your PR and your media campaigns. If you don't know, if you've been living under a rock all year, our Great Legal Marketing Summit is starting on Friday this week. It's the 23rd. If for some reason you didn't know about it, which a lot of people, I didn't know anything about that. I ignored all the 30,000 emails I've gotten. Or they can go to glmsummit.com, right? They can still sign up, I'm sure.
Yes.
Or you can show up with your credit card at Arlington Renaissance on it's all day Friday and Saturday, and then we have our own boot camp on Sunday, the 25th. And if you've been under a rock for that too, it's fwmbootcamp.com. There's still like maybe 2 seats available, I think. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much. I hope that you have a wonderful fall and a great Halloween.
A spooky Halloween.
Right? I hope you get more treats than tricks, or if you like tricks. Okay, everybody. Thanks. Thanks, Molly.
Thanks, everybody.
Jamie.
Thanks,
Take care
guys.
now.
Take care.
Bye.